You're listening to the Money Pig Podcast, brought to you by Goodwin Investment Advisory, where our mission is to lead people to financial peace, independence, and generosity. I'm your host, Reed Trigo, again joined by certified financial planner, professional Ray Brown.
Well, hello there, Reed.
Hello,
it's great
Ray.
to see you.
It is.
It's great
to
face.
see me.
Yes, sir.
My face for podcasting.
Absolutely.
That's awesome. Yeah. So glad to have you back.
Great to be here.
Here's something that's been on people's minds lately, and thought we should talk about it.
Okay.
Is renting a home in the current economic conditions a terrible idea? Like forever, it's just been common understanding that, I want to buy my own home, and if I'm renting, I'm throwing away money. And so I just want to explore that. We're sitting here at, 7% mortgage interest rates.
Yeah.
A limited market. There's not a ton of inventory out there. Home prices are high. So let's kind of walk through that and just kind of let people hear us think about it. Cause I don't know. I have some thoughts, and I found a couple contrary views too. So here we go.
Oh boy, I love a good contrary view. Hey, it's you're right. 7%. We're here top of June 2024. Interest rates as of this morning 7%. Still kind of holding steady, and everyone says, "Hey, they're coming down. They're coming down." But they've been saying that a minute, and we know that that's the direction it's going, but no one is for certain when. And so I think, that's definitely something that's on the minds. And like you said, Reed, home prices are going up, and we always talk about, love real estate, love it as an asset, but this is one of those times where I got to say, like, to answer your question, it depends. And we hate saying that, but it's, not necessarily a horrible idea.
Yeah. And I think, the housing market has risen, prices have risen so much that, there's this stigma that people are like, I shouldn't rent, I'm throwing away money, as I was just saying.
Right.
But I don't know. There are some positives here if you want to rent, and making sure that no matter which way you go, that before you buy a home, you're in a position to do it. You need to have a sizable down payment, hopefully, be able to do this over a certain amount of time. Keep your mortgage payment, your housing payment under 25% of your gross income.
Yes.
So those are some things you want to do up front.
That is very true. And I think that's kind of the biggest factor in that decision of, does it make sense to buy versus rent? And it's, you want to make sure you got all your ducks in a row. You want to make sure you've got a solid emergency fund. And I know, back up a couple years when rates were at the all-time low, 2.7%, you are in an environment where it's like, well, why the heck would I rent? The mortgage price is cheaper than the rent prices currently. Like, you can buy a small home versus renting an apartment, and it ends up being cheaper. You own it. And then the thought is, you fast forward 5 years, you sell it, you upgrade in house, and all right, I'm going to get everything back that I put into this plus a profit. I got to live for free for 5 years. And in fact, I got paid to sleep here. And so I was talking to a coaching client recently and kind of walking them through the dynamics of buying a home and what the cost, how we kind of interpret the expense, because it's not really an expense. And so when you think about that, like, I'm getting, fast forward, you say, you sell a house, you turn $100,000 profit. It's like, if you do the math, you divide that profit, the proceeds by the time you live there. And it's like, well, I technically got paid $100 a night to put my head on the pillow. And it's like, you got to go down that rabbit hole of looking at it that way. And so, here we are.
You do that, it can make it all more fun,
right?
Can it?
Yeah.
All right.
The numbers work. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's look at some of the benefits maybe of why renting a home, an apartment, whatever, is okay in the current market. One of our first topics here is like flexibility and mobility.
That's a good one.
Okay.
Yeah. You hear it a lot in like military towns, like Pensacola, Florida, where my folks are. We got a buddy who lives in Coronado out in San Diego, and it's like, well, military area. And then you've got people that are coming and going and transient, and they've got families. And I think it certainly does. This is one of those cases where, Reed, this whole conversation is very similar to the idea around leasing a car. Does it make sense versus not? And it's like, hey, at the end of the day, it may not be the smartest thing mathematically, but in terms of psychology and just the overall lifestyle, the hassle that you have to go through, like selling a home and buying a home, it's a very big, people, you say like, hey, what's the most stressful things you've ever done? And that one makes the list. It's up there in the top 5 of graduating college. It's like, oh my gosh, getting to the closing table for a house and sending the wire, and it's down to the minute. And are we going to lose everything? And we're homeless. We're in between homes. homes, it's stressful. And so I think that certainly weighs into the conversation as well. But just, flexibility, mobility, it's one of those things. If you don't see yourself living in a certain spot for very long, less than probably 2-3 years, it could make sense to take a look at renting for sure.
I think home ownership's a 5 to 7 year decision, probably, if we're really thinking about it. You got to be in there a while. One of the other things is when you're young, starting out, and you start your career, get that first job, second job, you're probably still interested in being able to pursue opportunities pretty easily. So if you are renting, it keeps you from having to sell a house if you get a promotion opportunity, or maybe the new company will buy out their current lease, or maybe you just have to pay it out over 10 months and then whatever period of time, and it's not a good deal.
You could get stuck there as well, but it's apples to oranges, and just there is something to say about having that piece of being able to like up and go when you need to. Hey, at the end of the day, you just clear out your lease and you roll. And we are now, like you said, Reed, in an environment where interest rates are much higher. So how does the average, mortgage compare to the average rent? I mean, certainly it's all baked into the pricing. A lot of times, those apartment buildings and things like that are also backed by debt. They're financed buildings as well. And a lot of folks out there pushing real estate, private individual landlords, they don't do it the way we would talk about, or the way that other financial folks would say. It's like they've got mortgages themselves and they're passing that on to you. So it's like, a lot of those costs do still get baked in there. But certainly we say renting is not the devil. It could make sense in a particular situation. Yeah.
And then the other thing is like, especially young people, 20s, 30s, whatever, getting married, need to upsize. Need an extra bedroom, they have a child or twins or whatever happened. And that makes it a little easier if you're renting. It's a lot harder to have a small house and need an extra bedroom. It's harder to add on than it is to just, at the end of this term, you know what? We might need to upgrade to a larger place.
Yeah. And you never know when you get stuck in an environment like we are right now, where it's like, well, crap, we need new house, but we also need to sell old house. And how do we juggle that? What if we get a perfect buyer that's buying ours? Because you can't do these contingent offers like you used to be able to do. It's like you may list yours and it could take a long time for someone to come around, or you get someone right away that wants to buy your current home. And then you're like, well, we don't see anything we want to buy. And oh my gosh, rates are still going up. And so, you're then in that homeless spot of like, well, shoot, what do we do? And
we had neighbors who actually sold their home a couple of years ago. I mean, they're high to the market, right? And they had a camper and they had a lot to build their next home on, but they had to tear down what was there. So they just put their camper on there. They have 3 children, like probably 13, 10, and 8.
Gosh.
And they lived in this camper. They would use the house that was there a little bit, and as they built the new house, they were
it's like
just awesome.
One thing at a time, I guess. But
timing
that checks out for sure.
Okay, when you rent, you can avoid some major repair costs as well, right? Yes. Like what kind of repairs does a renter not have that a homeowner would?
Tons, all of them. I mean, all of them. Gosh, let's be real. I mean, you move in and AC unit craps out, or you've got issues with appliances, just those unspoken things that you don't think about, or, I mean, not to mention, saving for property taxes as well. When you're owning the home, it's like there are those extra costs that go into it. A lot of folks, you'll escrow that through your mortgage company. Others prefer to take care of that on their own and, save up if your company will allow you to do that. But property taxes and insurance, that bill's coming in the mail, and it's like it can be very hefty based on where you're at in the country. And so that's another thing to think through. Just general appliances of what could go wrong. The maintenance type costs, repairs around the home, it can add up.
We just got our property tax assessment.
Oh boy.
And it's going to be great. But I have immediately seen ads for these companies that help you challenge them, or whatever you call
the appeal.
It. Yep. The appeal.
Yep.
Yeah. Social media, got an email, got a postcard in the mail. They know exactly what came in my mailbox.
And they depend on that. So,
Funny. Hey, another cost I know that landlords will typically pay, and not that way the homeowner or the renter is not having to, is like landscaping, exterior maintenance, things like that.
Very true. Very true.
Okay.
Similar to condo living. I spent a lot of time living in a condo, and I loved it simply for that fact. I was traveling a lot for work. It's like, you're young and I don't want to have to deal with this kind of stuff. And so just being free and clear, someone else takes care of the pool, someone else takes care of the grounds. It always looks great. You just lock the door and go. You can still own it, but if you're buying a house or something like that, you've got to really think about total cost versus a rent price. And in home ownership, if you sell it at a profit, you're getting that money back. And so it creates that idea that, hey, I'm living for free. And that's, I think, what we all think. You got to buy, people will say. And it's like, it's cheaper to buy, it's cheaper to own because you get the money back. But that very well could be the case. However, it may also be a very tight squeeze just based on those other expenses. It's more than just what is the monthly mortgage payment? It's what are those taxes? What's the insurance? What's the annual repairs and things like that? And then you go to sell it, you got to make sure someone's going to buy it. What are the touch-ups and things that need to be done to get it to a sellable state? It adds up. Yeah.
Yeah. And when you get into a house, I remember the biggest surprise to me, moved into a new house, move in, we're like, this is great. It's really bright in here. And you got to buy blinds and drapes. That stuff's expensive too. I was like, dang, I didn't think about that. And trash cans and all the stuff that it doesn't have yet. I'm like, man, there's a lot of expense.
I think my algorithms on social media know that, we just recently did buy another house, but it knows I'm in that process. And it's like a young couple like sitting on the kitchen counter and it's like, bought a new house and it's just their house is completely vacant. And it's like, down payment wiped out our savings. And so here we are. They're just like looking around awkwardly, like there's crickets chirping, like there's no furniture in their home. And it's like, that's another thing to think through is furnishings. You got to buy those things. So that stuff adds up.
That came up the other day. We're looking at adding redoing our deck on the back of our house. And my wife's like, oh, when we do that, we're also going to need to refurnish it. And I'm like, oh, geez, here we go. Man, we are. That's true.
Yeah. And that is something to really like, if you got to check those prices because that stuff, it quickly can get out of control.
Oh, yeah. All right. So on renting, an argument would be that you can build savings instead of paying a mortgage. The point is that money that would go toward a mortgage can instead go into savings or investments.
I could see that being true, but only in an environment where the mortgage was a lot more expensive.
That's right.
And when I say mortgage, I mean all in total cost. So we're thinking like the actual mortgage, your principal and interest, as well as the property tax, insurance, and a little bit of funds for those annual repairs and things like that. What if the HVAC goes out? That's $10,000. So that gets baked into your cost there as well. Granted, you sell the house, you get all that money back. Chances are, assuming you're selling it for a profit a couple years down the line when you've gotten to a point where it can make its money back. Mm-hmm. But sure, if you're found again, it depends on the scale and the size of the home, I suppose. Like if you're renting a place that's cheap and it allows you to defer extra cash or to save up for buying a home, then that can certainly make sense.
Great. Okay. So here's the other thing I did, because you hear this idea that, okay, when you're renting, you're just throwing money away. Okay. I'll grant you that. Let's just say that's true. However, if, my experience with kids and friends' kids, like $1,600 to $1,800 a month in rent is not out of the norm at all for 1-2 bedroom, whatever. And so I was like, all right, let me just take an example. Let's say we're going to buy a $400,000 house. Okay. This is a nice area. Let's say you want to be here. We get a $300,000 mortgage. So we actually put down 25%, which is a lot for a young person probably to put down. We put that down. We got a 7% mortgage. So we have a $300,000 mortgage at 7% over 30 years.
Yep.
Okay.
Or follow.
Versus we rent for $1,700 a month, $1,750 a month. Okay. On this mortgage, 7%, $300,000 over 30 years, your payment is $2,000 a month. But $1,750 goes to interest. And I'm not even adding in property taxes and insurance, right? Mm-hmm. So $1,750 goes to interest, the same amount that would be going to rent. Did that get confusing? Your eyes are glazing.
Yeah, I'm crunching those numbers in my mind. It definitely, it makes sense. I'm tracking there. Yeah.
I'm reading an amortization schedule.
Oh, yeah.
So that first month, your $2,000 mortgage payment, $1,750 went to interest. $245 went to equity.
Right.
So it is now you own $100,000 plus $245.91 of equity in that house.
That makes sense. Yes. So what you're telling us, Reed, is the classic, like, rent is throwing money away. In this case, don't think that a $2,000 a month mortgage payment is going all in your pocket because you are throwing a big chunk away to interest. I mean, it is the largest portion of the payment during those early years.
Right.
Yeah, it takes halfway through the term before you get to the midpoint where it begins to goes towards principal. Right.
That's right. Because in month one, $245 went to principal. Month two, $247. Month three, $248. It's sort of the same math that we need to teach high schoolers about how amortization works, because when we get all excited because I can refinance my mortgage, that finance company is probably going to start that amortization schedule over. And you're going to be right back at the start, putting $200 toward equity versus the ton of interest that's
Oh, sure.
out.
Absolutely. Oh, yeah. Yeah. You refinance a 30-year mortgage 2 years in, it's like you get a new 30-year mortgage.
Yeah, congratulations. You can start back over.
I mean, it lowers the amount you need to pay each month, but that's very interesting. And I guess the one thing to think through in terms of comparison would just be, well, how much is that value of the asset appreciating? So it's like in your example, you buy a $400,000 home. You're getting to enjoy the appreciation on that full $400,000 value of home, even though you don't own the whole thing free and clear because you've got that mortgage. And so it's like, well, that goes up, 3% a year. It's going to continue to grow. And when you do ultimately sell it, you're getting that full appreciation on the value that you sold it for. And technically you didn't fully own it. And
That's right.
That's where it kind of works in your favor. And so
I agree.
It gets very tricky. You'd have to truly basis so many variables. It's what area are you in? What's someone willing to pay for it down the road? You got to factor in those real estate commissions. And so it certainly makes sense. Like you said, 7 to 8 year play. Mm-hmm. Is that what you said? 7 to 8 years? Like
5 to 7.
5 to 7. Thinking down the road, it's like, it's a very long-term decision. I think.
It is. Okay. So, and generally, this is where your brain is, I can tell. And generally, we think that owning your home is a good idea. I was talking to my son about it. He's like, but I want to own the home I sleep in. I want to own my yard. I get that. And that is a very normal, probably the traditional path. It is a good wealth builder over time, we feel.
I would say so.
Especially if you start in the right place and you're responsible about it and you
got
keep
your emergency fund in place. You're prepared for what will go wrong. It's not a matter of can. It certainly will. Yeah.
That's right. Let me throw a wrench in everything.
Oh gosh.
I was listening to a podcast the other day. John Tamney was on it. He wrote a book called Bringing Adam Smith into the American Home, a case against homeownership. So I just think it's interesting. Now, Adam Smith is an economist from I don't even know when I learned about him in Econ 101, but he's the one that wrote the book and it talked about the invisible hand, how markets come to equilibrium based on whatever, capitalism. All right. But anyway, so this guy takes a very economic look at homeownership and he makes a case against it. So I'm going to give you a couple of his arguments.
Okay. We didn't talk about this in the pre-show, so I'm nervous. Yeah.
I'm going to give it to you.
Here we go.
So he says housing is a consumption good, not an investment asset. He argues that the primary purpose of a home is for shelter and consumption, not for building wealth. He views the common belief that homeownership is a path to prosperity, or as a path to prosperity, is misguided. So here's why he is saying this. He said the opportunity costs of tying up that much capital by sinking a large amount of money into a single illiquid asset like a home forgoes owners the opportunity to invest that capital more productively elsewhere, such in a stock or a business or something like that.
Interesting.
What say you? You need more time to think about that.
Well, yeah, I'm not a huge fan of that logic. Again, I'm not an economist and I don't, not to diss this guy's opinions, but hey, at the end of the day, it's just that. And hey, I'm an expert in my opinion as well. So
yeah,
I don't know. I see it as both. I do, of course, sure. Predominantly it is indeed a use asset, but it's also a great wealth builder. And you can see people especially over a longer period of time. Like we said,
I know. Interesting,
I don't know.
Right?
Yeah, I don't necessarily agree with that one.
Yeah. So he would also argue that realtor commissions, and you got to consider taxes, you got to consider the insurance, which you essentially are paying for that in a rent situation anyway, because it's baked into the price, right? But he would argue that that's 6% right out of the top if realtor commissions, at least as it is right now, that does cut into your overall return over time.
It certainly does. Yeah. Yeah. As that appreciation goes up, you're paying 6% to sell. And so the commissions are high. They're definitely high, but depends on how long you've held the home. At the end of the day, we're currently looking to sell a rental property we've held for just over 3 years. And it's well, all right, cool. You're taking a little bit of a haircut, but you're still coming out ahead. And even in a short year environment and even in an interest rate environment we're at now, it's well, it just depends. And I think I have the mindset around, if the landlord is packaging a home and they're selling it and it's got, the insurance, taxes, all those things baked in, like you said, and they're doing this, it's a business for them. They're making money and they're going to end up taking that pie. So if it's predominantly the place where you sleep at night, why not you be the landlord of that home and take that on? I understand the illiquidity, of course, that's all part of it. And so
And the lack of flexibility that he's
Yeah,
arguing.
the lack of flexibility. But if you also are sitting on that much cash, why it's tough for me to say, let's just rent with that and take this money and do something else with it. It's
Right.
like, I don't know that I would want to personally do that. Also to think through just risk, stock market's volatile, goes up and down. How volatile is the housing market over a long period of time compared to something else that you would put that extra opportunity, doing the full opportunity cost equation. If you were to take that money, put it elsewhere, well, what's that risk versus reward on that? And so,
Well, I often, speaking of the volatility of markets versus real estate, I often hear they talk about the V-shaped recovery. It kind of goes boom, boom, back up on a stock market recovery, where real estate tends to have a U-shaped recovery. It kind of goes down, stays, grumbles for a little while, and then it comes,
interesting,
starts to come back up. I've heard people talk about that. So, all right. Well, interesting. So the point is, overall, I think the takeaway is, you know what? In an ideal world, if you're doing things in the right order, yes, owning a home is a great long-term plan.
Yeah, if you've got the capital for it, you've got your debts cleaned up and your life's in, you've got these kind of, like I said earlier, the ducks in a row, you've got the emergency fund and you're looking for a solid long-term investment and you don't want to pay rent, absolutely. We'd say it's no doubt about it, home ownership.
And however, there are cases where it's not, especially in this economic environment where interest rates are high, home prices are high, inventories are limited.
Yeah.
You're really having young people having to stretch. They feel like they will never be able to own a home. That is not true. Hang in there. Renting is not the end of the world. There are benefits for you. Like, you're not paying big repairs and you have flexibility and stuff.
And
like
take
that.
your time because, like we said, you don't want to get into something and then turn around and sell it and hate it. It's like, if you can't find the perfect spot, there is no better answer than renting. Rent for now.
That's
Yep,
right.
Absolutely.
People be like, I'm going to miss out on it. I'm going to miss out. There's a time component to it, man.
Clean up your dead snowball.
Take your time.
Yeah. Don't rush it.
Awesome, Ray. Fantastic. Thank you so much for bringing your experience and expertise to the conversation.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
And as financial advisors, we manage and rebalance portfolios, but the unique value is that we work to understand our clients' individual goals so we can have these types of planning conversations that are so personal and unique to each individual. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you next time. Bye.
The Money Pick podcast is hosted by Reed Trigo, a financial advisor at Goodwin Investment Advisory. This podcast is intended to share information and perspectives, but should not be interpreted as legal, financial, or tax advice. The opinions shared by participants are not necessarily endorsed by the company. Goodwin Investment Advisory is regulated by the SEC, and the company operates in compliance with applicable securities laws and regulations.